Hello and welcome to an episode of Grateful by Lady Law, where I interview people in my life that have been mentors, friends, and a wonderful support system. And we are lucky enough here today to have one of those people in the studio. Today I have Judge Stephanie Hansen here with me. Judge Hansen and I have known each other since I was in Sarpy County, so I think it's probably been about at least 15 years.
Oh, at least. Yeah.
And so I just wanted to sit down and talk with Judge Hansen. I have watched her over the years. She has been probably one of the strongest female support role models for me, just watching her change in her career, her personal life, with fitness. It's just like all areas of life. You're my role model.
Very sweet.
And so I just wanted my listeners to get to meet you and kind of hear about how you got to where you are, and some of the things that you and I have connected with throughout the years. So the first time I met you was in Sarpy County. You were working as a prosecutor. How long were you a prosecutor there in Sarpy?
I started in Sarpy at the county attorney's office after graduation from law school. Well, actually, after passing the bar. So I started in September of 2000.
Okay.
So, yeah. So I was there for 15 years. And then I took the bench November of 2015. So I'd been there 15 years and a couple of months.
Okay. And you are on the county court bench in
Omaha.
in Omaha, in Douglas County. Yes. And so when I started at Sarpy County, I want to say around 2008. So you'd been a prosecutor for about 8 years.
Yeah.
And I started out as a public defender. And I had seen you a few times in different courtrooms, but we really got to connect in drug court, in the problem-solving court. And how long had you been in the drug court at that time?
That's a really good question. Let's see, because that would have been, I think I started in there in 2013, because I think I was only there for 2 years.
Okay. Yeah. And the one thing that I remember about so drug court it's called a problem-solving court. So you have a staff of a team. Yes, the drug court team. You have the judge, prosecutor, public defender. You have counselors. You have
probation.
Probation,
law enforcement.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's really multidisciplinary.
Exactly. And so Judge Hansen and I were sitting there on opposite sides of cases, but we really got to work together to try to find what would be the best good for each of the defendants that came into drug court. And what I remember is your ability to bring some levity to situations. And whenever we were kind of stuck on a problem, you always helped us find middle ground, and there was always a sense of humor there. That when I remember when you first cracked a joke, and it was always appropriate at times and everything like that, but you first crack a joke, and I remember thinking, she's a prosecutor. She's not supposed to be funny. Like, what is that? But then I realized that's just who you are and the way that you help things get solved in those problem-solving courts. But before we get into all of that, one thing I wanted to talk, let my listeners know a little bit about you is what made you want to get into the law and kind of your backstory.
Oh, gosh. Well, growing up, I thought I always wanted to be a doctor or something like that. And so when I was in undergrad, I was applying actually for dental school. And I kind of needed to beef up my resume, just like do more volunteering, like try to be a little more well-rounded. So the Adams County, went to Hastings College. So in Adams County, they had just had a brand new CASA program start. And so I signed up for the training for that, and I really enjoyed the training, and I had the opportunity to go to court. And I actually thought I wouldn't like court because growing up, my dad was arrested and for selling drugs and went to prison when I was young. So I just kind of had a negative feeling about the court system. So I didn't know that I would really enjoy being a part of it. But going into the courtroom and watching the process and seeing how many different people are part of the process, and that as an individual, you do have the ability to make a difference, even if your part seems like a small part. Like it really is a picture of everybody kind of coming together, which is one of the reasons that drug court was so cool, is that you get everybody on the same page. as opposed to having one person being perceived to make a decision or have, so I enjoyed that part of the process. And so from that, I thought, maybe I should apply to law school. And because I'd never verbalized that before, I was very sheepish and I kind of just went and took the LSAT without telling anyone. And because I really wasn't sure how that was going to go. And so then after I got my score back, I was like, well, maybe I'll just apply and kind of just see how that goes. So, and as we know, the rest is history. So
where did you go to law school?
I went to Nebraska.
Okay.
So, awesome.
And then from law school, did you go straight to the prosecutor's office in therapy?
I did. So actually, I took a little hiatus between college and law school. So because I applied to dental school and to law school, I had to make some decisions. And so I didn't want to rush those decisions. So I decided to take, I don't know if you call it a gap year, but I needed a minute to figure it out. So I was able to get a job in Grand Island, which is close to Hastings. And I worked at the courthouse there as a victim witness advocate. It doesn't exist anymore, but it was called the Family Violence Coalition. And so I worked there for a year and I liked that. And again, it kind of gave me that courthouse experience and really did solidify what I wanted to do. But because of that connection, that my boss there had sat on a board with Trish Freeman. I think it was the Nebraska Domestic Violence Coordinating Council. But anyway, when I was graduating from law school, my old boss had reached out to me and said, hey, Sarpy County has just gotten a grant. They're going to hire somebody to do just domestic violence. And so she said, maybe you should consider applying. So I did.
That's awesome. So, yeah. So you touched on a few things that I kind of want to dive into a little bit. One of the things that you and I know that we've connected with, and one reason why I have so much reverence for you is that you weren't born with a silver spoon in your mouth.
No.
And your own family, in your childhood, you had some issues that actually make you more relatable to people in the courtroom, to the defendants, having your father having gone through those issues, and also being a child of a parent that was incarcerated. How has that helped you in your career?
I think that early on, it made me realize that, first of all, families look different. Like, what you see on TV, and at the time it was kind of, Beaver Cleaver, like all these like perfect families, and like the most different family would have been the Brady Bunch, where, I think they're both maybe widowed even. I mean, it wasn't divorced. My parents are divorced. I mean, I think you just realize that families come in shapes and sizes, and even people who make bad decisions doesn't mean that they're completely bad people. And, my dad had definitely a lot of flaws. But one thing I will say is that he always was interested in my brother and me. Even when he was in prison for 6 years, he called on our birthdays. He sent letters. He was genuinely interested in knowing what it is that we were doing. And he didn't lose touch. So again, even till the day he died, he wasn't always making good decisions. He was always interested and wanted to be connected. And I think that is just one of those things that you realize that people aren't all bad.
Yeah.
And people come to court because maybe they lack a certain capacity. They lack coping skills. They're just, again, most people just aren't bad at their core. I mean, I just think that a very, very small amount of people are just really bad.
Yeah. And a lot of times it's either substance abuse, mental health, past traumas. There's a motivating factor for why people do the things they do.
Totally.
And even though we don't always agree with it, sometimes figuring out the why helps you kind of understand. And that's where, with the drugs, drug court, problem solving courts, when we could figure that out for those different people, that's when we could try to help them change things.
It seemed like in drug court, a lot of people, it's like almost like they needed adulting.
Yeah.
And they needed help on how do you get all your ducks in a row. And you realize that, people who are successful, I think you do have these people in your life who make a difference. And I was really lucky. My mother's a very strong person. She's extremely capable and she's really positive. And so even despite all of the challenges that my dad had and divorce and blah, 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 my mom was always like, he's your father. He loves you. He's made bad decisions. But I mean, she didn't badmouth him. But at the same time, she was always like, you aren't entitled to anything. So if you want something, you have to work for it. If someone doesn't like you, that's what it is. Someone doesn't like you, but you have to figure out how do you work with somebody who doesn't like you, or how do you get along? And I think those were good. Those were really good lessons from a person that I admire, my own mother.
Yes.
And so I was lucky to have that balance in my life.
And that's the other thing I've always picked up on is that you and your mom are close. And
Yes,
she's been
a great
pillar for you. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And that in turn has made you, I think, a great mom too. You have kids.
I do. I have 2 daughters.
Yeah. And they are out of the house now.
They are gainfully employed.
That's very awesome.
It is.
So we can get into the parenting aspect here in just a bit. I want to talk a little bit more about your career and the legal stuff. So you're a prosecutor. At what point do you decide that you are ready for the next step?
Geez. I really enjoyed the process of the career. I really did. I think that I remember the first time being in the courtroom and holding a file and being scared to death. And it's like, I think I'm doing like a failure to yield the right of way, traffic ticket trial. But it's so intimidating. I felt so intimidated. And, going through, and I remember watching the lawyers who had been around a while, and I thought, when do you get to that point where you feel confident that you can pick up a file and you can walk into court and you just sort of know what to do and you know what needs to be done, and you just have that. But it's like it takes time. Yeah. And I think that's why it's the practice of law, is because you're practicing all these different skills. And just when you think maybe I learned something exciting over here and I can do this, then things change. And I think it's fun, and it keeps you humble.
Was it hard doing domestic violence cases?
It was much harder than I thought it would be. And I think that, again, nothing's a one size fits all. And you would speak with people, and most of the time people just wanted it to stop, and they wanted people to get better, and, trying to meet people where they were, that a conviction wasn't always the best thing for someone's family, but then sometimes it could offer support through probation or different programmings. And sometimes it was, there's really nothing to do other than to buy time by getting this person maybe jail time or something, so somebody has a time to move on, or maybe plan where they don't have to worry about that person so much.
Yeah, and I think that that's one of the things that a lot of times in law school, they don't prepare you for, that emotional side. Like, because you're in people's lives, you're listening to their stories, and that's trying to help kind of fix their lives even, and so that's where like the counseling piece of being an attorney seems like it came in a lot, because I know that you have to meet with those victims and listen to their stories. And a lot of times, like you said, they don't want the person, the offender, to actually go to jail. They just want it to stop.
They just want to stop. They called 911 or called for help because they wanted help to have it stop. They didn't necessarily think through to the trial, incarceration, consequences of it. They just want it to stop. And then once you get there, it's like, is there a way we can work with the defense attorney and the court to help ensure maybe it does stop?
Yeah.
And again, there's no secret recipe for it, but you try to meet people where they are and try to make good decisions about what's available and what's reasonable at that time.
Right. And I think that's one thing that gets lost on a lot of like the TV sitcoms, is that there is like a collaboration between the criminal defense attorneys and the prosecutors, that the prosecutors aren't always out for the maximum sentence, and that's just not reality, and there's no way that would work. That would clog up the system.
Well, and I think that's a great misconception of the law, is that we're having a trial on everything. We're having a trial when the issues can't be resolved, but there is resolution in so many of the cases. And quite frankly, the criminal justice system can't have a trial on every single case. It'd come to its knees. There's not enough people to be able to do all that. So you do have to collaborate, and you do have to work together. And that's where relationships are actually really important, because who you can trust, kind of where people's strengths and weaknesses are that you're working with. And you can work together to bridge that gap and make a positive outcome, find justice, whatever that may look like.
Exactly. So when did you decide that you wanted to become a judge?
Probably, I think that maybe the bug was planted. I always admired the judges that I got to work with. I think that, again, in Sarpy County, we had just great judges. They were so, they're just genuinely nice people. They gave good feedback. Yeah, I felt like I learned a lot from the judges, and I was very, I admired them. So there was always part of me that's like, gosh, how do you get there? That's a really neat thing. And so I think maybe the bug was probably put in my ear, like, I don't know, sometime like 2012, 2013. And I applied for the first time in 2013 and it didn't work out, which, that happens.
Yeah.
And so then I applied again in 2015 and then got appointed.
And what does that application process look like? I'm sure it's not simple.
It's not simple. There's an application process. You fill out an application, and then that application, there's a judicial nominating commission that's made up of 8 people, so 4 attorneys, 4 lay people, and of the 4 attorneys, no more than 2 can be of the same political party, and then the same goes for the lay people. So the applicants present to the judicial resources or judicial, is that what it's called? Judicial nominating commission. Sorry, too many commissions in my head right now. And that group then decides who's qualified or who would be a good judge, and then they forward those names on to the governor's office. So then step 2 of that process is meeting with the governor and having an interview, and then ultimately it's up to the governor to make a decision on who they want to appoint. So you get letters of support and things like that to hope that the governor's making a decision based on input from people that you've worked with.
I'm sure that's kind of a nerve-wracking process.
It is a little nerve-wracking.
Yeah. So where were you did you get a call? Did you get an email that you had been selected?
I got a call. I was sitting at my desk, and I got a call on my cell phone, and it was from a cell phone number. So,
Yeah.
you're kind of hoping that you're going to get a call, but you don't really know. And of course, there's plenty of cell phone calls that you get that you're like, who's this? Oh, right. You want to sell me a magazine or whatever?
Yeah.
So I answered it, and it was the governor, and
it was the governor himself. Oh,
so that was pretty exciting.
That is very exciting.
Then they always tell you, don't tell and you don't say anything other than to your family until the press release comes out. And it's like, I don't think that my face could handle that.
It dared to go into hiding.
Yeah, you're just kind of like, I don't know. People are like, what? Who called? I'm like, I don't know.
So then how quickly do you go from being an attorney in Sarpy County to being a judge? Like, what was the transition?
I think for me, it was a couple of weeks because I had the luxury of being able to just hand it off to the next person in line, sort of. It's different from people have to close a practice. So if you're in a government job, it is much easier to make that move more quickly.
Awesome. So, and then how is it different being a judge now? Like, I can't even imagine.
One of the first things that struck me is that the judge really doesn't know anything about the case. So the judge only knows what's presented to them because judges can't go seeking information.
Yeah.
And you can't, if you do happen to know something, you can't let that affect your decision. So for example, if I'm presiding over a car accident case and I know that intersection, I can't erase that intersection from my mind.
Yeah.
But I can't use anything that's not presented to me to make my decision.
Yeah.
So lots of cases, and that's something I see in the news too, is that people are really quick to be critical of a judge, but it's like the judge is only as good as the information that they're given. And so in trials, there's a lot of things that don't come up for a lot of different reasons. And sometimes it's because things aren't relevant and the attorneys can't get them in. Sometimes it's just other rules of evidence. But it is hard when you don't know all the facts, because as the prosecutor and as the defense attorney, you know your case inside and out. And so as the judge, you don't know it inside and out.
Yeah. And sometimes I bet attorneys kind of assume that you probably know things.
And then that's the other thing is that the caseload is different. So as a prosecutor, I had criminal cases only. And I had, the handful that was assigned to me. And then as a judge, I have cases that are civil. I have cases in probate, which is guardianships, conservatorships, estates, adoptions, and then criminal. So you have this like whole host of different things, and you can't keep, there's no way that you could possibly know everything about every single case.
Right.
So you're preparing for your day. So you look at what's on your docket and what specific thing about that case do you have to know. So for example, if it's a motion to suppress, like, okay, so I know I'm listening for, probable cause or, something like that. So it's like you have to figure out what little piece you're doing that day.
Wow. That's a lot of preparation.
Yeah. I mean, but it like any job, you figure out what you need to do to prepare and what you need to know. And it helps with the anxiety of it being a new judge is to realize that the whole thing's not yours to decide today. Yeah. You just have little pieces that you have to do.
I bet it's much like what you had said before when you first were an attorney, you had that first file and you're like, how did they get so good? I'm sure that after a few months or whatever, you're like, okay, now I'm getting in that rhythm.
Yeah. It does. It takes a little while and to fit. And, everybody's different in how they learn and how things make sense to them. And so trying to find, your own way of, okay, how do I stay on track? How am I prepared?
And I'm sure that one other learning curve at the beginning was the different county, because every county does stuff differently. Yeah. And since Douglas is so huge, I mean, you're a little pond and you went to the big lake, and it's like, yeah.
So that was a different, I think each courthouse has its culture.
Yeah.
And so it was a different culture and, trying to just come in and learn and soak it up and figure out, okay, what do you do? And not try to say, well, the way we did it over here was the right way, but just trying to soak it all in.
Yeah. Do you ever find any difficulty in coming to decisions, especially on like domestic or, cases?
There are times I wish that I could do more to get more answers. Sometimes I can take a pause. I've learned a lot about not hurrying. And that just because we're set for something doesn't mean I have to decide that today. Right. And if I do feel like I need more information, is there a legal way that I can get more information? So, for example, in guardianship cases, if I am feeling like I'm not sure that person really needs a guardian, we can ask a guardian ad litem to come on. We can order an evaluation, but just to let you feel a better comfort level, and it's trusting your gut. Even in sentencings, I've had things where when I'm reading the pre-sentence investigation, maybe I'm like, gosh, I feel like I'm seeing that maybe there's an issue of mental health or even capacity. And again, feeling that comfort level that I can take that back, talk to the parties and put it back to probation, say, hey, can we get a little more information or maybe an evaluation? Because I'm thinking maybe this piece needs to be looked at. And so, again, it's just that comfort level of, okay, maybe we can take a minute and just make sure we're doing the right thing. But yeah, I mean, things are always in that shade of gray, I guess.
Yeah, that's just it. It's not always black and white.
Not at all.
Yeah. And so that's good that judges can take something under advisement. And I know maybe some attorneys get impatient with that, but to me, that's always like, okay, so now they're really going to think about the case. Like, this is actually a great thing. And I always explain that to my clients. Like,
well, and the other thing about taking things under advisement, I mean, I didn't get smarter because I got a black rover. I didn't magically learn everything. So good arguments are presented to you, and you need to take a time to figure that out. I wasn't blessed with all of the answers.
Right.
So it takes time to look it up and read everything and just make sure that you've had a chance to really digest everything that's been presented. So it is a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you ever have a hard time managing the caseload? Because it seems like there's just more and more cases.
Yeah. Yeah, it is hard sometimes, and it's just making sure, and you have to check and double check everything, it seems like. So I feel like I spend a lot of time that is not on the bench doing things.
Yeah. And I don't think people oftentimes realize that, how much behind the scenes, the judges in chambers or even at home, just working on cases.
Yeah, there are a lot of moving parts and a lot of calendars and other considerations, whether it's the other parties of the case, spatial considerations. Like, I mean, as far as like Douglas County, we have hearings in certain rooms because of space constraints.
Yeah.
So, is the room we need to have even open or available for something? Is there an interpreter available? There's just, it's not just me.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing that all gets figured out? Like at the end of the day,
Yeah.
like somebody's scheduling this, somebody's, like that's like the inner workings of the clock. That
It is.
It amazing.
It is. Yeah. You realize how many people and how many parts there are to make things move.
Yeah. Well, one other way that you and I have connected over the years is through fitness. And you motivated me to run a triathlon.
Yeah. We had fun.
We did. Oh my gosh. I never thought I'd be able to do it. And I haven't done it since, although you have done a lot. So one of the things that I, wanted to talk about is kind of your fitness background and, what all you've done in your life, because I think it's remarkable. And most people probably don't even know because you're so humble about it all.
I grew up just playing sports for an activity. I wasn't like a standout athlete by any means in anything, but I liked it. And I love teams. I like being around people and, so it was always fun. So probably I was about 35 and I decided I really wanted to do a 5K. And so then I'd never been a runner. I mean, I was the kid that like in PE, when they said we had to run the mile, I was like, oh God, this is terrible. So I didn't want to do that. So running was like kind of a big deal. So I started by, I was too embarrassed to go outside and run during the day because I didn't want my neighbors to see me. I know, isn't that dumb? So dumb. I totally get it. It's like in my brain, that's where it was. So I would wait till it was dark. I'd put the girls to bed and then I would just try to start running until I couldn't run anymore, which meant like, I was like looking at mailboxes. I was like, okay, I'm going to go 5 mailboxes today and then I'll walk a couple of mailboxes. And it was just trying to build up some endurance until I could do that. And then I realized that once you kind of get that first mile under your belt, it's not as hard to build. The first mile is always the hardest.
So crazy how that is true.
It is, but it's like really kind of the same metaphor in life. Sometimes it's that first mile, that's the hardest thing. And then to build on it is much more comfortable.
Yeah.
It's not as bad. So then from 5K, then it's 10K and a half marathon and triathlon and just, yeah. So
what all have you done?
I've done 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons, all the distances for Ironman. So sprint, Olympic, half and full.
Wow. That's incredible.
So, and then I've thrown in an aqua bike.
Oh my gosh. What is that?
Swimming and biking.
Okay. So out of a triathlon, which part's your favorite? The running?
The swimming.
The swimming? Yeah. I totally disagree with that because I will never forget when we went to Des Moines and you start with the swim and everyone else was ahead of me and there were so many people. It was the first time and I wasn't like mentally prepared for that.
That is horrible
to be in the layer. Yeah. And so I kind of panic. And I remember I was in the middle of the lake and I was just floating like everyone else is swimming by me and I'm floating and I'm just like, I can't like quit now like this, and I like, and Judge Hansen did not put so much time into helping me. And, all of the times we'd go running together in the morning and stuff. I'm like, I can't quit now. So that but I wanted to so bad. The swim was tough.
It is. And that was a weird swim because if I remember right, wasn't the lake down?
Yeah.
And like at some point, like you're in the middle of the lake and you could put your legs down and and I'm not tall. And I was like, I can touch
it. Was
the middle, or you'd kind of be swimming and your hand would hit the bottom.
Right.
It was very strange.
It was strange. And you would think that would help, but it didn't because you still needed to swim fast. Like it almost was more of a deterrent.
Yeah. I remember that being like a very bizarre.
It was.
I felt like I was in a pond or something.
Yep.
Or a puddle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very strange.
And then you've also had, as doing all of these things, you've had some injuries too.
Yes.
That you've had to overcome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I learned that I was a little more fragile than I realized. I went through a patch of a lot of broken bones. And so from that, I did sort of pivot with some of my fitness and tried to take some of the outside stuff inside because it was a little more gentle on my bones. So I started doing Orange Theory, which I really like, and I still do. And then I've added Pilates to the mix, as I'm aging. That's been a good, yin to the yang. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Didn't you have a fracture in your hip and you continued to run a race?
I did because I had no idea that that's what it was. So, yeah, I was doing a half marathon in Washington, D.C., and I just started feeling like sick at my stomach. And I don't usually get that either. And so someone had given me like one of the little runner's gels. And they said, maybe you just need a little something. And I was like, okay. So I take this gel and it just made me I felt worse. And so then I felt like nauseous. And so I think I was at mile 10 of 13.
Yeah.
So I kind of pull off to the side and I actually got sick. So then I remember I did not feel pain. And then all of a sudden I go to walk and I thought, did I pull my groin throwing up? Like, what in the heck is going on? So I was like, okay, just walk it off. Like it's, you've pulled something, whatever, you're going to be fine. Just get to the end and you'll be fine. So I try to start, I'm kind of running and I'm like, oh my God, I'm like in excruciating pain. So then I'm trying to walk, but it's in my head. I'm just like, quit being a baby. Just go, like, quit being a baby. You got to get done with this. So yeah, I did finish. And then, I just kept being in pain. So probably a week after I'd gotten back to Omaha, I finally made a doctor's appointment. And then I had an x-ray and it was like, yep, I broke my pelvis.
I will tell you, I couldn't believe it either. There are so many times I've been out running or doing something and I think of that story. And I'm just like, if she was out there, she had a broken pelvis and she continued on, like, why am I, I have a side stitch and I want to stop.
Well, again, I didn't know that if it was that bad, I probably would have been like, oh, can I get a fireman?
Right.
And then like when I did the Ironman, I had already known that I was like this close to a stress fracture in my foot. So with the doctor's advice, he said, just kind of relax for, on the running for a couple of weeks. Your cardio fitness will be there and just hopefully it will heal enough that you can get through the marathon at the end. So everything's going great. I'm in the marathon part. And again, I get that feeling again where something's wrong. And at this time, again, not thinking of the obvious, like I already know my foot's injured. I thought I had a piece of wood in my shoe.
Oh no.
And so I was like, but if I sit down, I'm not getting back up. And like, but really what it was my foot was broken and my foot was swelling. And so that swelling was making it feel like there was something in my shoe. But kind of at the same time, I see this guy who's running on a blade. He's an amputee and it is hot and you can just see the irritation around the blade. And I thought, same thing.
Yeah.
This guy can do it. I can handle a wood chip. Like, let's keep rolling.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. You're a badass.
Sometimes it's just like you just got to get through the pain, And I think it's, again, a good metaphor for life. There's a lot of things that are uncomfortable and you just have to get through them. And it's like mind over matter, keep moving forward. It's gonna get better.
Yeah. That's such a huge, huge lesson in life.
It is. Yeah, just to keep moving.
And we've talked about this recently too. We've talked about fitness and how important it is, but you definitely use this as self-care.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it really helps. It's kind of intertwined with, I think what we had been talking about is just kind of like, it helps with your career too. Like it kind of goes hand in hand.
Yeah. It does. I try to go over my lunch hour to an exercise class and I can go and I can be anxious. I can be disappointed. I mean, I can have a lot of emotions, but it's kind of like that clearing out. It's like I don't have to think about work. I don't have to think about anything for an hour. And it's just mine. And I always feel better after I move my body, even if I don't want to.
Yeah. That's awesome.
I always feel better, even if I didn't want to go.
So we talked a little bit earlier, so I wanted to come back to the parenting piece. Yep. That's another piece that I've observed a little bit over the years. And I'm just astounded. The fact that you have two successful girls, just that's because of parenting, and I'm sure that they've achieved so much on their own, but it was really a good foundation. And so what has parenting meant to you? And, what are kind of some of your theories of being a good parent?
I think that a lot of times we parent like our parent, like our moms, like moms parent like their moms, I guess. And so I've tried to do a lot of the things that I thought my mom was really good at. My mom was very calm. She wasn't reactive. Like she didn't like freak out. So if we told her something, she didn't freak, she just didn't freak out. And I thought about that and I thought it is so easy to freak out and just like start talking. And then what that does is it clamps up your kids and then they don't continue to tell you what it is that that they're sharing with you. And so if you think about listening and not reacting, you can help your kids help themselves. And, my mom was a real big on, our job as parents is to give you the tools to be an adult. And so that's why we keep you for this long, is so that you get all these tools and you get chances to make mistakes and you get chances to do things right. And you get chances to learn from the good and the bad and from other people's good and bad. So I tried to do the same thing, or my husband and I tried to do the same thing with our girls and encourage them to find their own voice. And, if you're having trouble with someone in school, you got to figure that out. And you also have to look inside. Are you doing something that is annoying, or could you do something differently? And I think that was a good lesson for them, because they are very good advocates for themselves. And they were really good about that with friendships, with, maybe a teacher who didn't care for them or they perceived didn't care for them. Or they thought maybe they weren't getting, everybody feels like they're not getting a fair deal sometimes.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like, well, what do you do about it?
Yeah.
So the girls, I think it's better if kids go advocate for themselves. They don't want to hear from me. The teachers don't want to hear from me.
Right.
I think that, it's just, for someone's telling you, well, little Johnny, they're whatever. I just think that it's so much better if it comes from kids. So the girls learn to ask, what I want to do well in your class. What can I do better? What am I missing? And it helped them.
I remember on one of our runs.
Successful.
Yeah. On one of our runs, you had told me how the girls had been fighting and they came to you and they wanted you to fix it. And you told them, no, you guys work this out. And then they both were like astonished that you weren't going to solve their problem. But then, an hour later you go back in there and they're like playing together like nothing happened. And that stuck with me. And I think that's so true of, I have nieces and nephews and I've like actually used that with them when they're at my house. And I think that, and it's just it's such a successful thing to watch kids work things out on their own. And even in their own little sibling groups, like it's just such a cool thing to see. And because that they're going to take that on in other areas in their life as they grow up. And those are lessons that too often in our society probably aren't even getting taught.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally true. You look at, it's like, I feel like we're at this really weird place in society where people are waiting for that aha moment to say, I got you, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
And it's like, don't you want to like have a better resolution? Do you want people to be in trouble, or would you like to just, have like a learning or, be part of your own solution? So, I think that, and to be fair, the girls were teenagers at that time, I think, like in their early teens.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, girls.
Yes. Right.
Just figure it out.
Right. And then most of the time too is like picking those battles, teaching kids to pick the battles, and not every injustice is the end of the world. And there's so many little things like that to teach them. So you've talked a lot about your mom and how she was such a strong person in your life. Are there any other people throughout your life that have been, mentors and role models for you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think career-wise, definitely, like I said, the judges were awesome. I feel like every judge that I got to work with left an impression in a certain way. And that was great. I had some really great people that I worked with in the county attorney's office, and then one of them being Trish Freeman, who was my boss. And, she gave me a lot of opportunities. She gave me a lot of hard feedback, which, you need to hear that too. And you have to learn how to take constructive criticism, that it's not a criticism of you as a person, but it's like, how are you better at whatever it is that you need to be better at? And so learning to take those things. So she was really great, and has always been very good to me in that way. Lee, as a boss, was very good about giving opportunities. So I felt like I had a lot of really good people professionally in my life. My husband is a lawyer, and he's older than I am. So we're about 9.5 years apart. And so he's been really good about just that practical advice about, even if you don't know something, if you walk in as prepared as you can be, you're not going to make a fool out of yourself.
Yeah.
And not to say that I haven't made a fool out of myself, but I do take that advice to heart, that it's, the more prepared you can be for something, the less surprises at least you'll have. I have an aunt who is an amazing person who has been very successful in her career, and I thought she was a great mom and has a good marriage. And so that's the other thing. It's like sometimes looking at people who have things that you didn't have and that you think are doing it right. And so growing up with divorced parents, I loved being around people who had good marriages and had good relationships with their kids. And that's what I wanted.
Yeah.
And so I liked having, those mentors as well.
Yeah. It's always so good to, be surrounded by these positive role models. But the one thing that and this is reason why I want this podcast to be out here so people can watch it and think about their own mentors and role models in their lives. Because too often these people are in our lives and we kind of take them for granted, or we don't look for the lessons, But I've been watching you.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah. And one of the, and the relationship with you and your husband, I haven't been around you guys that often, but what I do see is it does seem like there's a really good balance of you guys getting to be your own person in your relationship, but also, having that connection too. And I feel like it's, it just seems like such a healthy relationship. And you guys joke around too. I've seen that and love it. I love that. The humor that you bring to life is just you're a ray of sunshine to be around.
Oh, well, that's nice. I think that we all have our coping mechanisms, and I think that, sometimes humor is mine. Sometimes it's well placed, sometimes it's not, but that's what I am.
I love it. Do you have anything else today that you wanted to talk about? I know we've hit a lot of the points. I could sit here and talk to you for all day long, but we only had 45 minutes. I just wondered if there's anything else just to cap it off.
Well, thank you to you for having me, and you are an inspiration to me as well.
Thank you.
You were very strong and smart and just a wonderful person, and I am glad that we are friends and colleagues.
Yes, thank you. One of the other fun things that we do together every once in a while is go golfing. So hopefully this year we'll get to go out at least 1 or 2 times. So I look forward to that.
It's fun. And we don't necessarily play well, but we play fun.
Yes, exactly. We have a good time. Yeah. Great. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. And to all my listeners, thank you again for tuning in to Grateful by Lady Law. You can catch me on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, anywhere you get your favorite podcast. So until next time, stay grateful.
A Huda Media Production.